something to incentivize the officers to not do things like this. And if there's no consequences, there's no repercussions, then they're gonna they never will have a reason to stop. It doesn't, that it won't change.
Right. So if we could just start holding cops accountable for shooting people and, different U.S. officials responsible for war crimes, maybe we can make some difference here, Will.
Yeah, like the law and everything, the law.
So the next one I have here, Will, is you wrote up over at RT, and this was, I guess, last night, Wednesday night. I'm sorry, we
Yeah.
record this thing early in the morning, so sometimes it's hard to track days. Two officers shot in Louisville amid protest over Breonna Taylor charges. One suspect in custody. So tell us, Will, what's going on in the response to the grand jury not indicting these officers?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, as you might expect, like right after they announced this verdict, you had protesters taking to the streets within like an hour. Like even just like that afternoon, they had already started to like gather and mobilize and started planning, the protest. And by nighttime, as these things tend to happen, some protesters started tearing stuff up, lighting a few small fires, smashing some windows. It certainly was not anything like we've seen in other cities like Minneapolis or even Kenosha, but it did get fairly rowdy. But to the extent that it was contained, I think it probably had something to do with the preparations the city had taken before the announcement. Like I said, they declared like a national, or not a national, a local emergency, a state of emergency before this verdict was announced. And they also brought in, I think, like 500 National Guard troops, had them on hand, things like that. So they did keep it somewhat contained. But late on Wednesday night, you did have people shooting at cops, seemingly people who were mingling with the crowd of protesters. Like it wasn't just like something that might happen on an average night in Louisville anyway, in a bad neighborhood. It seemed like it was like associated with the protesters, and they didn't just shoot at the cops; they shot the cops. Two cops were shot. Fortunately for them, I guess it did not. They did not have really bad injuries. Both of them survived. One of them, I think, had to go through surgery, but they're both, they're fine. But yeah, two cops were shot. Did get pretty wild in that sense in terms of violence. But in terms of like rioting and arson fires and stuff like that, it did stay somewhat contained. But again, we did have shootings.
Well, in a way, Will, I've been worried about this, but it's something that I've kind of been afraid is coming. Not only because of just kind of the situation in the U.S. with how many cops are getting away with murdering people, specifically people of color. Although Duncan Lemp, a young white man killed in, I think, Maryland, right? Not that
Yeah.
long ago, was a very similar situation to Breonna Taylor, and they haven't even like done a tenth of what they've done to the killers of Breonna Taylor, to the killers of Duncan Lepp. I mean, at least the cops of Breonna Taylor are thoroughly disgraced in the town, and I think again one I think all have been fired, and one again is facing some charges. Where in Duncan Lepp, I don't even know if they've investigated it at all. So
Yeah.
like these are deeper problems, but um, the fact that it goes on, and then especially just the way that the media has been really playing up on it. And look, I'll see stories all day about different interactions police have with cops, or police have with regular people. And a white cop shoots a black man, and that's the headline of the story. But then you see like a black cop beat on a white lady, and they'll say like cop beats a woman or something like that, but they don't then specify the color of the skin. And so
Mhm.
it seems like they're really trying to build a narrative around that. And I feel like we've seen this a little bit before, where there was the police shot in Dallas, and then what was that guy's name? Dorner, Sam Dorner, I think. Oh, out in California, who
I'm not
killed
sure.
some police officers. Yeah, it was in LA. I forget exactly how it all went down, but this guy was a cop, and he tried to report some things that his
Oh,
fellow
yeah,
police were
yeah.
doing, and he ends up killing a couple cops and stuff like that. And so my guess is that if you kind of pour this much fuel on the fire, eventually some people are going to bubble over and start to do things like this. And I think the solution, if you want to prevent it, is just holding the other cops accountable. Not that you do, obviously one of these people has been apprehended, and anybody who's just randomly shooting people is, a disturbing character. But I don't know. And then seeing a lot of the other things I've seen in just on the streets of Louisville in response. I saw one kid come up behind a cop who was fortunately wearing a bike helmet, but swing a metal bat at the back of his head.
And that thing
Had
connected too, man. You could
yeah,
hear it like tink, like hit his
yep.
head.
Had that hit his head, I'm guessing that cop would be dead, or at the very least have significant brain damage and be fighting for
Yeah.
his life at this point. And then I saw another one where a protester was laying in the street and a cop on a bicycle ran over that protester's neck, which maybe that person is fine. I certainly don't see that as close as attempted murder or saying somebody in the back of the head with a metal bat. But at the same
Yeah,
time,
that,
that's some pretty severe, assault charges that cops should be facing.
Yeah, with the bike one, I thought people were maybe overreacting a little bit to that because if you look close, the cop isn't actually riding the bike. He's actually just walking along with it, and like it is like you should not do that to somebody where you like he like ramped it over the guy's head. But like I don't know, some people were saying like, oh my God, that cop should be charged for like attempted murder or something. But like he wasn't his weight was not on the bike and stuff.
Oh,
But still,
okay.
it's terrible optics though to see him just like you could tell the cop totally did it on purpose. He's like, all right, this guy's laying in the road. I'm just gonna keep going and like ramp right over his head.
Well, there is a little bit of a higher expectation on the people whose job it is to maintain order, not to act like thuds in the street,
Right,
versus
right.
the people who, are potentially, looters and people taking shots at police.
Right.
So, any more on this, Will?
No, I think we hit all like most of the important points. There was more. There's been more unrest in Louisville tonight. There was more, but I don't think it even got to the level of last night. So it's not. There wasn't much to comment on there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, two cops were shot, and that's notable, but it's not like the city was burned down or anything like that. So, actually, from the amount of I think rioting that people thought was going to happen, it probably came in way under expectations.
Yeah, yeah,
Again, though, there were the two cops shot. That was significant. But
yeah,
let's talk about some looting now, Will.
yeah. No kidding.
Right? So